Josh, you and I both stumbled across an interesting diagram from Pifi earlier today talking about how the short mechanism works with ETFs. Let's go over that a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, before we go into that, I mean, we've been hammering down how important these next few days are for this OPEC cycle. I mean, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, today, Tuesday, February 22nd, there was no real price movement with GME. But if these cycles continue, and we think they will, we will see some pretty drastic price movement in the coming 2 weeks, call it. And if this is the data that supports that, and by no means did we discover this on our own, full credit to Pifi, but we will try and interpret this data the best of our ability, poke some holes in it if we can.
Oh, what's going on is Pifi was kind enough to put up this chart, and it was a really complex chart all at once, but we're going to do our best to walk through it and kind of put it in our own voice to do our best to that regard, and curious to see, what you think about that, and perhaps see where maybe we're getting stuff wrong or maybe we've gotten stuff right. But anyways, Josh, when I read it, this is kind of my thinking. It starts with an authorized participant. An authorized participant is just someone who has the ability to go back to the ETF and redeem the ETF for the underlying. So let me say that in English. It's like if the ETF is a Lunchable that's composed of various things, the authorized participant is able to open the Lunchable and actually take out the tomatoes, take out the crackers, take out the cheese or whatever, right? They're actually able to take a Lunchable apart. And likewise, they're able to put a Lunchable back together. Since they can redeem by sending shares back to the ETF to get the underlying sub-shares of whatever, but they can also gather the underlying sub-shares, package them up, and send them to the ETF to create shares of the ETF.
Correct. Yeah, so we have these authorized participants going to these ETFs like XRT and saying, here's the deal. We need to, here, just go to the next one.
Gotcha. So I think what happens is that the authorized, let's say you have
like hit the next button to pull up the.
Okay. So here we are right here.
The next one should be, they go to the ETF.
Oh, you want me to go to the ETF first? Okay, hold on.
Well, that is first, right?
I think both these things happen at the same time, but I think from my mind,
they're going to the ETF to go short, like to where the ETF then goes short.
Right, but the thing is, like the ETF, they're doing it at the same time that the authorized participants are selling. Like, hold on, let me draw on my screen.
No.
It's going on at the same time I think this is going on.
I would disagree. I think the authorized participants are going to the ETF, and then the ETF is then going short because they're using the ETF to go short.
No, because the ETF creates synthetics. This gets back into DTCC right here. Because I think when they do the redemption process, what's really going on is like they're telling, hey, DTC or whatever, like we're redeeming 50,000 shares or whatever, right? The DTC says, okay, yep, we're going to zap these 50,000 shares out of existence and we're going to credit you, Mr. Authorized, participant, however many shares of the underlying. So we're going to give you DTCC IOUs that are theoretically backed up by, I think it's State Street is the sponsor of XRT, but whatever. Like that's, I think, the mechanism of how it happens. So like the ETF isn't necessarily going short. Like what's going on is, they talk about synthetic shares. These are the synthetic shares that are being created. It's the DTCC crediting the authorized participants account or whatever, right, with however much they're due from the basket redemption.
Yes, but that comes from the ETF. They are getting those from the ETF. The first transaction is from the authorized participant to the ETF to make those synthetic shares to then drop the price, I believe. And you know what? We'll keep this in the video. Usually we'll edit this kind of stuff out, but please, we need your help. We are trying to figure this out and understand it so we can exactly pinpoint what's happening. Yeah. I think they're going to the ETFs. They're going to the ETFs for X amount of shares, and then the ETF then sells from the ETF gives them those shares. Then the authorized participants going down selling the shares short, but it's synthetic.
Yeah, but like the synthetic nature, I think, comes from the DTCC. So like, I think really...
the DTCC can be the middleman there. They can be the tri-party repo guy but there's still two people doing a repo. The DTCC is just the tri-party guy allowing this transaction to be done. So I think these authorized participants are going to the ETF. Then when then the ETF is going to go short synthetically these GME shares, but giving them to the authorized participant, the ETF then goes to the forward market and buys a contract for X amount of shares.
So in this case right here, hold on one second, let me turn on my drawer. So just what you're saying is that the ETF is short, just pulling a number on my back. So I think probably like, let's say 250,000
Well, the
shares.
authorized participant goes to the ETF, so they go short. But then they're giving those synthetic shorts to the authorized participant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's just say it like this. So my mind was, it was easier for me to follow from the viewpoint of the authorized participant than from the viewpoint of the ETF, which would be like this part up here. So I think the way I read this here is that when the authorized participant is credited with the underlying shares that were in the basket, so in other words, you redeem, I don't know, 50,000 shares of XRT to get, however many shares of the subcomponents or whatever, right? Those are then sold into the market, or at least GME is then sold into the market. And when GME is sold into the market, it's actually not a short sell, it's actually a long, it's marked as a long. Because they're technically not, I mean, they're technically not selling it short. This is what makes it so weird. This sends the price of GME down, but moreover, these shares never deliver. So that's also all of a sudden you've got this failure to deliver problem that's lurking in the background. Anyways, we'll return to that in a second. But when the price goes down, then I think that's when the ETF would enter into a futures contract where they are obligated to take delivery of however much GME they're short, let's say 250,000, just pulling a number on my backside or whatever, right? But they agree to take delivery at the spot price at the time, and the spot price at the time just happens to be when the synthetics were sold into the market, dropping the price. And at the same time, again, from the perspective of the authorized participants, this means they then turn around, and in order to basically extend the failure to deliver timeline on this,
which is like a T5, they'll then sell the puts, which gives them a T plus 30.
In the money, yeah. So it basically
that is why we see these OPEX runs.
Yeah.
See, I agree that these authorized participants will sell short. Then when they do fail to deliver, they'll go to the ETFs to bring more time on. But I'm just looking at what Pifi was saying is I thought these guys, after all this happens, once they like I'm saying for this new cycle, what's going to happen after this OPEX expires, over these next few days, I think these authorized participants, they're then going to go back to the ETF and run this cycle again. But I could be wrong, and that's why we're just really trying to understand this. And I can see by your face you think I'm wrong, and I can see your point, and you most definitely could be right. I'm just saying I don't think this is such an easy answer. It's kind of a complex question.
Yeah, I the way I feel about it right now is like both you and I have bits and pieces of the truth, but not the entire truth, and we've got to figure out how to get your truths to sync up with my truths, and ultimately sync up with what's really going on in reality here. On a more broad sense of GME too, when you look at the price action, what I found was particularly interesting about today was GME did follow the market, but it didn't necessarily follow the market to the extent it had before. And I see this as a good thing because I think you want GME to diverge from what the market's doing is the first thing. The thing that catches my eye the most is that the borrow rate remains high from Ortex. And it's not so much that I'm concerned that's 100%. What I find interesting is the delta, that it went up to a very high number and it stayed at a very high number. And the reason I find that interesting is because we didn't see this, or the only time we saw this before, I think, Josh, was it was January? And maybe, I think it was only January of 2021.
Has only been 100%. It was last January was at utilization was at 100% for a while, but it has not been there again until now. And I do find it interesting that it seems usually right after these OPEX, we see these massive runs. Today, there probably should have been a pretty massive run. There are a lot of macro events like all these tapering, Russian tensions, and market going down, which is often going to put downward pressure on GME. But it seems like if they are delaying this as much as possible, there's a reason behind it, because usually you want to cover this stuff, even with the reg shot that I don't fully understand yet either. That why are they using? It seems like they are using at the last resorts right now, because right after these OPEX, they'll run up the stock so they can cover. So once it runs up, then they'll short at the peak, drive it back down, and and then repeat the cycle. But it seems like they're delaying this cycle as long as possible and throwing new tricks at it. If you only have a magazine with 300 bullets, it looks like they've already exerted a lot of those bullets. I'm not saying that there are not more, but it seems like they are throwing we're seeing new stuff today that we did not see in the past, which leads you to believe this is not their first option. And as Justin said, it may not be their last, but it is certainly not their first.
Yeah.
And we don't know how far it is from the end game. We're just trying to figure that out. And as you can see, we don't have a clear understanding of this. So please don't take our word at all. We're literally just looking to understand this ourselves.
Yeah, but that's I mean, it's this stuff is fascinating, and again, what I would say is, for people who are tagging along on the saga, right? I would take some comfort. I would take some comfort in the fact that I'll just say what I said before. I don't have the knowledge or insight to say this is their last or their final bullets, but I can say that, or with a much higher degree of confidence, I don't think this is their first choice. And if it's not their first choice, that means that they cannot engage in their first choice, either for reasons I don't understand, but they can't. They don't seem to be able to do that. That seems bullish.
Right now, one of my base cases is that they are keeping this down as long as possible, especially through these cycles, for the reasons of when this does kick off, or if this does kick off, they want this FUD, and people saying, okay, like, thank God I'm bailed out. Like let me sell my position, because like, thank God we've been in the dust for so long. These cycles have failed. It seems like we're just going to get a nice squeeze to 500. And that would be best case scenario for them, that people do just sell out their position. And I'm telling you, Justin gets these text messages all day of because you always have to question yourself. And I question myself maybe 3 times going up the steps, 3 times going back down. Yeah. But it's still sticking to the guns and finding as much evidence as you can to prove or disprove your thesis. And it seems like we are being proved more correct every single day.
Yeah, I would say, like, I would expect if there's some, I know, like, it was, geopolitical tensions heat up and like the entire market, take a dump. I would also expect to see GME take a dump in that particular situation. But what I would look for in that is it dumping as much as the rest of the market, or is it staying relatively flat? That would very much pique my interest.
If the market's tanking and GME starts to creep up, then we'll start to see some real institutional buying, just because it has a negative beta.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, some institutions are going to buy that because it has a negative correlation to the market, and that could just cause a negative feedback loop. And if the market's going down, the margin limits are going to decrease, which could kick stuff off. There's so many different cross currents that you have to look for, and it's impossible you have to weigh each one, which one weighs more. We don't know what's going to happen, and just let's see, because today's February 22nd at 9:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There should be a run-up over this next week and a half, 2 weeks. If there is not, then shoot us, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well,
because
like I said,
be wrong about this whole thing, because this has happened before, and they might have another trick up their sleeve. We understand this one, then they change the tactic, and that is part of the fun. And understanding it is all the merrier.
Yeah, it's a classic. Well, you should say it's a classic. They know that we know that they know that we know. It's like, yeah. So I will be as much fun as it's been. I look forward to when this thing finally pops off. And
if this thing finally pops off.
Yeah, if, like, the guys out there will understand that. It's been a long time coming.
I'd see, for me, it's been a short ride. I've only been on this saga for about not even a month now. I'm a recent GME bull, but I've thrown my horns down and really dove deep. So, guys, without further ado, please, Pifi, we're looking for you, man. Explain this to us in deeper degree, because we are some rubes that do not understand it. Thank you
Yeah, and
very
and just to add some more clarity to that, specifically like the mechanics, the plumbing of just exactly how the synthetics are created, and
Yeah, we
from the
want to walk through exactly what's happening so we can rationalize it in our brains so we can understand and grow from it. And I think that would do everyone a justice. So thank you guys.